So I finally got around to watching the new Netflix disaster movie called Society of the Snow. And let me just say, this movie was pretty incredible. It tells the true story of the 1972 Uruguayan U-571 airplane crash that would later be known as Miracle of the Andes, that was also carrying, by the way, a rugby team on as their passengers. But this is actually a story that has been told before in another movie that actually just reached its 30-year anniversary last year called Alive. It starred Ethan Hawke during his younger years. But even though both these movies tell the same story, this movie is like 10 times better. Although this is a movie that actually came out in 2023, and I mean, it didn't get released to Netflix until 2024, so I mean, mostly got a late start. But even though this is considered a 2023 movie, and even though it's a little early, this is by far probably one of the best movies I've watched this year. And honestly, I think it's going to be the best movie Netflix has released, that is going to be released this year. This movie is directed by J.A. Brianna. I mean, please excuse me if I'm saying his name wrong, because I know he is a Spanish director. But if you know who he is no stranger to the disaster film genre, since he directed the movie The Impossible back in 2012, which told the story, another true story about the 2004 tsunami that happened. And, well, I mean, compared to that movie, in this disaster movie, this movie is probably his best flick he's made. Comparing that to other films, too, because he also directed one of the Jurassic Worlds, and I think this is far better than that movie as well. The way this story is told is just brilliant, in my opinion, because it focuses not just on two central characters, which the two central characters I'm referring to are the ones who would eventually, go and find rescue for them. It focuses on everybody. Everybody that survived that crash, and also the people who would eventually die there. And the change that these people go through, it's so intense and somewhat horrifying in a way, because it just makes you feel like, get a little sense of what they went through. I mean, you start like seeing them when the crash happened, and then they start, just holding on for hopes, like someone's going to come. But as these days just keep going by, one after the other, you start seeing them get desperate, you start seeing them losing hope, and as the change keeps going, they eventually just saying, like, some of them are like, that we're going to die. There's no way someone's going to find us. And then, because, remember, I mean, if you don't know, these people had to survive for 72 days. 72 days up in those mountains. And when they finally get back and you see all the change they went through, you're like, even though the story was told, you're like, geez, how'd these people do it? How did they survive such an intense wilderness and to that extent? The cast was brilliant too. Every person who was casted in this movie were the same nationality as the people who were on the plane. Probably not specifically, but I know a majority of them were either from Uruguay or Argentina. And the best part about it is that none of them were top-notch or elite actors. Majority of them were newcomers from what I know of. And they showed up to work. They all did an amazing job with their parts in this movie. Every single one of them kind of like had their own role in the movie. The one, though, that I liked most of all was a character, I don't know this actor's name, but he played the character called Numa. And during this movie, he is actually also narrating, like, what's happening, like, while they're there, or while things are happening, or when there are flashbacks like, they're flashing back, looking back at their lives, like, before this happened. But the way it was narrated, it was kind of narrated with a twist. Though, I'm not going to give too deep on the spoiler. I mean, I guess giving telling you one character who was the narrator is kind of a spoiler, but I don't think it's too big of one. But the way it was narrated was kind of a twist. And if you do happen to see it, the twist is very brilliant and clever at the same time. I liked this little twist that J.A. Brianna did. Moving away from the plot and the cast, of course, The next amazing thing about this movie is the cinematography. It was just fantastic. I mean, specifically the Andes scene when we're watching them survive this ordeal. I mean, it was so hard to tell for me which shots were, done on a set and which parts were actually done offset. That's how great it was and how well of a job it was done. I mean, of course, like before the crash, I could tell where, which parts were, of course, offset and which parts were on the set. It's that mountain cinematography that's just incredible too as well, because it's not just the fact that they're surviving, it's such an amazing view, the Andes Mountains, and that's like a place like people probably would want on their bucket list to go visit. And it's amazing how they show the terror in a beautiful place. Like, something that's just so beautiful can also be terrifying at the same time. Now time for the flaws of this movie, and there was really only one flaw I saw, and it really wasn't even a big one at that, in my opinion. It was the pacing. And let me just explain it, why I feel the pacing was kind of an issue, and could be an issue for others who are planning to watch this movie. When you get to the plane crash actually comes pretty fast. They move to that pretty quickly in this movie. But after that, I mean, once the plane does go down, it like moves a lot slower. I mean, of course, this is taking place during a 72-day time period, and although it doesn't cover every day, it takes place on the important days, because members of that actually survived this, the ones that are still alive, they actually did help in producing this movie. So they mainly covered the important days on the timeline, and although it didn't happen every day, it was most likely the days where people were dying, and till eventually we dwindled down to the 72nd day, where the final 16 people who did survive got rescued. But until that hike, where our two heroes eventually find help to come get them, it's pretty much stuck in that same place, at the debris site where the plane fuselage ended up. And sometimes when a movie does that and it just stays at one point, it sometimes makes it feel like the movie is moving kind of slower, because we're not moving from place to place. Nothing like a lot big extravagant things are happening. Because this isn't supposed to be a movie where extravagant things happen. This is a disaster flick where people are doing everything they can to survive. And there are important things happening here. It's just like they're not like to that extreme. And, well, of course there are certain parts that do get to that extreme. But the point I'm trying to say here is, since it's at that debris field, pretty much the whole 95% of the movie, it just kind of made it feel like it moved slower. But still, I think it was a great runtime, a perfect runtime for this movie. It could have probably been good as a 3-hour flick. All in all, Society in the Snow was pretty much a fantastic. And let me just say this as well. If you guys have seen the movie Alive, the other movie I mentioned before that also tells the same story, and you liked that movie, then believe me, you're going to love this movie. This movie tells the story far better than Alive does. I'm giving Society of the Snow a B. Really good movie, great cast, great way the story was told, cinematography was amazing, pacing was kind of meh, but I believe if you can get past the pacing, you're not going to be disappointed with this movie whatsoever. Alright, well, if you guys have seen Society of the Snow, please comment here down below what your thoughts were on it. Also, if you like my other videos, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys next time. Remember, stay epic!